I am the justice of the night. I am the stalker of those that are lost. I am the Hamburglar.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, I'm SocioPsycho, and today we're going to take a look at Monochroma, created by Nowhere Studios, available for PC, Mac, and Linux. Now, if you're interested in one subject alone, use the video bar, as that's what it's there for. The game is a puzzle platformer cinematic, and cinematic in the sense of visualization because the story is pretty much non-existent. There is no narration or dialogue which is spoken throughout the game. The issue is not whether a game can be cinematic and play as a silent movie, but whether or not it's able to do that correctly. And I will state that if it's not done correctly, the game will end up feeling like death by PowerPoint. Now, also to note is the game is meant to run for 6 hours, and while everybody's taste is different, I had to stop playing after 2 hours and 40 minutes into it. This is important to note up front, because the game runs off as to a very boring experience where only about 20 minutes of my 240 playing was actually solving puzzles while the rest was walking. Like I said, in the review I will describe why these things happen and why it is that way, and whether or not your tastes will be different than mine and you will be able to enjoy a game where I have not. So when we go into the menus here, you can see New Game, Load Game. Load Game is by chapters, so you can go to where you've unlocked and play back to. And in your settings screen, the keys are not rebindable, which is unfortunate. You have in your video, full screen, quality, and screen resolution. Now the game visually is very simplistic as it stays to a black and white atmosphere, which can get a bit repetitive and dulling. Due to the lack of narration in the game, the black and white atmosphere doesn't help, I feel, in my opinion. The quality of the game is very simplistic and basic, as it shouldn't be taxing for your system. It's been running in between 70 and 80 frames per second with no issues. Now, sometimes it will sit nicely at 120, but other times it will drop to 60, but I have not seen it drop below 60. So there is some fluctuation here and there, but nowhere to the point where it has been detrimental. Also, I haven't suffered any bugs or crashes, maybe a few manipulations of the water mechanic, but nothing that has broken the game or caused any silliness or displacement due to mechanical problems of enjoying the game. There are plenty of screen resolutions. There's not much sound in the game, but I haven't found it to be overly loud, and the music is the same way. The music, for what they have, is actually good. The issue is that the soundtrack to the game is actually very short, and it doesn't do a good job of actually staying with the momentum of the game, and there are many moments in the game where it is actually completely musicless, and it leaves a dull, boring sense, or at least adds to a dull, boring sense. Now, when we go into a few of the basic mechanics to note before we go on, it does have Steam achievements and it does have secrets, and I compared the secrets I found to a guide on Steam, and I found that the secrets are actually pretty easy as long as you just continue to explore. They're not difficult to find or even get to, it just requires an understanding of exploration. Which leads to our platforming. Platforming in the game is very simplistic. You have different areas where yes, you may need to jump over a few logs here and there, as if you fall into water, you will die. Now, one thing to note is the visual animations of the characters. You play as your taller but skinnier brother who's able to jump bigger heights, and you carry with you your little brother who sprained his ankle and is a bit pudgy and fat. Now, this takes away from some of the realism, of course, and the capability of belief because he's so large and you're able to do so much so easily with him. But that's not really a detrimental to the game because you overlooked that stuff in a platforming game in the first place. You do many things in between swinging on ropes, climbing ropes, jumping on robots, and moving robots as basically movable chairs, as the robots have no really other usage other than just being able to move them up and down and side to side. A lot of platforming isn't difficult at all. It comes down to a simple timing mechanic which ties into the puzzles. Now, I will admit that the puzzles and the platforming have been integrated very well. that the hand-in-hand that they go for has been done with success. But the stations upon where you need to platform or solve a puzzle are so far and in between, separated by gaps of filler where you're just walking into those areas. It's hard to show you a lot of the platforming elements and puzzle elements because the majority of the game is walking rather than solving the issues. And the platforming elements that do come down to simply timing. You need to make sure that whether you're jumping up and grabbing yourself upon one platform and jumping up to another, it's all about getting the exact timing you need to be able to, rather than having to worry about wall running, jumping in a certain fashion, double jumping. There's less of a sort of Tarzan feel and more of a strategic time placement element to the game. Now this is what will challenge perhaps many of the new people to this type of genre who aren't expecting anything overly complicated or difficult and aren't expecting anything with a story element to it. So for somebody who's a beginner in the game, I can see how the puzzle elements would be satisfactory, but anybody who would perhaps be more inclined for a harder challenge would be dissatisfied with the platforming element in the game. The game is a little clunky in its platforming, in its jumping, in its rotation of your character and your movement and how you jump. And while that is very visible while playing, the game acknowledges by knowing of its shortcomings and working around those shortcomings in the way they develop puzzles. And this is nice to see that the people at Nowhere Studios understand that their character animation and the quality of their movement capability is not all that impressive, so they make up for that with how the platforming sections and the puzzles are laid out. It's very basic and very simple, and the biggest issue that I've found while platforming is really the controls do like to stick. Moving down a certain section, you can easily get caught on a ledge or a lever or a ladder when you just want to jump off a ladder and go straight down. You can easily get caught on these things, which ties into the puzzle elements. Now, the point of the game is that there is something amiss in the world. You are being chased by different types of enemies and you have to survive against different areas. And the puzzles and the platforms surround this, but unfortunately, whether you're being chased by an enemy or you are trying to figure out a puzzle, as they both tie into the same mechanics, you're unsure exactly how to succeed or exact moment you need to jump or the exact second that you need to leap from an area to complete your task, get through a window, get away from the enemy. That the majority of the times, not always, but the majority of the times, you will end up with just dying, forcing you to replay to make sure you get the timing correct. The game is very heavy on timing, and the puzzles are not, we'll figure out this riddle, or complete these pieces in this order. The puzzles come down to timing. Now you may need to throw a switch, which will start a conveyor belt, and a log will go into a grinder. It's up to you to have the right position to jump down onto a log while it's being chewed up by blades, to then jump off of a log onto a rope to get to safety down below. If your timing is off, then you won't be able to accomplish this task. And what I've found to be a most common use of the puzzles is an elevator. Now there'll be different types of platforms or elevators which move up and down, and it's up to you to play leapfrog, making your way up to the top right before the other half comes down upon you. Or you end up too far away. It comes down to a timing element of the game. The puzzles in the game are not all that intriguing. They're not anything large or impressive. It simply comes down to each time as a exact jump moment at time, rather than figuring out what needs to be done. Now yes, you may need to jump on block A to get to block B and figure out how to do that. You may need to dodge underneath a vent and figure out how to do that. And that's where the majority of the issues come from when it comes to dying. The puzzles are very heavy into trial and error rather than time and analytic. You don't have time to analyze what's going on. So if you don't know exactly when you need to jump or you're unclear upon where you need to jump, then you will most likely die and you'll have to retry figuring it out step by step. Whether you are swinging across a bridge, climbing up a rope, jumping from one platform onto another rope, it all comes on to timing. And while they have taken the animational quality into effect, that yes, your character will move slow at this rate, and if you need to pick up your little brother, who can only be placed in areas of light because he's afraid of the dark, then the game has been made so that the timing it takes you to pick up your brother, finish that animation, and run towards your location has been timed out properly to where it may be frustrating in the speed that it happens, but it's not frustrating in the capability of it not allowing it to happen. I haven't felt that the game has been unfair at all. For the times that it does have a puzzle, the puzzles have either been unique, or at the very least, specific to the game mechanics working hand in hand. But what I've found to be the issue is the fact that your little brother becomes more annoying than anything else. The continuational having to look out for him, leaving him only in places of lit, which I understand from a puzzle point and level design point, where they've constructed the levels so that you need to complete these puzzles, and if you don't complete these puzzles with your brother in the light, then you could perhaps even more easily get over the puzzles. Maybe I'm just heartless, but I found the little brother to be annoying more than anything else, as he didn't really offer anything in any fashion of helping with the puzzles outside of his weight. There will be a time where you need to use his body weight to raise a platform or two up, but outside of that, he is pretty much useless. He doesn't clamor for his life in any fashion, he doesn't add suggestions as there is no narration or dialogue, and I cannot understand the connection that I'm supposed to have with this character. The puzzles are well done, that's not in question. When you do come across a puzzle in the game, you need to make sure that you understand them. Now, as I said with the platforming, that the platforming wasn't difficult as it was a simple jump matter, the puzzles are the same way. For experienced puzzlers, you'll see nothing new here, as the mechanics are pretty much exactly the same as what you're accustomed to. There hasn't been any real innovation in that manner, and I haven't seen anything that was awe-inspiring. And while I will admit that I have not completed the game due to boredom, if they had something new and enthralling, they should have put it closer to the beginning to entice people to continue going, and set the middle up with more generic puzzles. While a few other ideas have been interesting, such as the rain element, extinguishing barrels of fire, which you may need a barrel of fire or you may not need a barrel of fire, depending on the puzzle, they are not overly complicated or difficult. Now this does tie in to people who may be new to a puzzle game or a platforming game as not to be overwhelmed, but for anybody looking for a game with more substance or meat or difficulty, they will not be able to find that here. Now maybe it's because I'm more experienced of a gamer that I ended up falling behind in these categories, that I can't enjoy this game to the same degree that somebody else has been able to. And when I look at the reviews I see on the store page, people praising this game 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5, number point values which are severely overestimated and overused, it begs me to ask the question, am I emotionally damaged because I don't care about a whiny little brother who won't be of help at all and is more of a nuisance getting through these puzzles than anything else? And the atmosphere is so simplistic that it gets boring. Am I perhaps expecting too much from a game, or are my concerns justified? And I feel that my concerns are justified in the fact that when you play the game, majority of the time you'll be walking from one point to another. There are 40 seconds to 2 minutes, at times, of cutscenes alone. Follow that up by large periods of time of just simply walking. There are many areas upon where you need to get to the top of a building, and while the game doesn't offer any platforming element to the top of the building, jump from this elevator to that elevator, jump to this platform, go over here, climb this rope, it simply comes down to walk from point A side of a building to point B side of a building, get into elevator to second floor. Walk from point B side of a building on second floor to point A side of a building on second floor. Get in elevator on second floor, part A, move up to floor 3, and continue. The game does not respect your time, and I feel that is the biggest issue. It doesn't matter how enjoyable the atmosphere may be, while the music does not help propel the world of it. The game gets old relatively fast. It does not do a proper job of enticing the player throughout a challenging aspect of here are platforms or puzzles to figure out, or even a story to fill in a gap. Now, I understand completely that a game shouldn't be made up 100% of platforming unless that's exactly what the game is going for. And the same can be said for puzzles. Unless a game is going 100% in one direction, it shouldn't do that. And while this game splits itself up into platforming, puzzling, and story, the story is meant to fill the gaps in between the two. After you finish a platform or a puzzle section, moving on to your next location of challenge, you are met with a visualizational movement walking through the screens rather than anything of real consequence. You are wasting your time moving from point A to point B to get to the next puzzle or platform. I was hoping that this game would be a lot better than it was, and it would have been if it had a strong story connecting platforming puzzling, but unfortunately it did not. And so in the end, while the puzzle and platform elements of the game are simplistic and not anything anybody with advanced, medium, or expertise in those genres will have an issue with, the story is so lacking and visually lacking in how it presents your empty space-time in between the two puzzles as empty space-time instead of filling story, leaves the game with much to be desired. Now, you may enjoy the atmosphere, and while the atmosphere does stay true to itself, it runs dry pretty fast. I cannot recommend this game. On sale for $5, perhaps, if you have some money to spend, but for the asking price of $20, which they want, I just cannot do it. Ladies and gentlemen, I have been SocioPsycho, and I thank you for watching. I hope this has been of some help to you. Comment below, like, share, and I'll see you next time.